Okay, I have to begin with a disclaimer. I am a Black American woman living in the US in a historical moment which can only be described as toxic on myriad cultural, political, and social levels. As a former high school history teacher, US history teacher, and a scholar who has spent the past couple of decades writing and teaching about comedy as political and social discourse through a US centric lens, um, I sincerely believe that laughter, whether mad, nervous, overdetermined, or under theorized, is what keeps me at least relatively sane. However, upon ruminating about the relationship between ongoing comedic commentaries regarding the Black American condition and the American empire, one of this country's original sins comes to mind, the gift that keeps on giving, slavery. And right now, acknowledging how white supremacy is baked into the legacies of chattel slavery does not inspire any form of laughter, really. Now, given their time constraints, I can only provide an elliptical survey of ties that confirm that Faulkner was right. The past is never dead, it's not even past. The connectedness to and the context for what has happened and what is happening resonates across centuries of lived experiences. Whether running from the slave patrols of the 17th and 18th century or confronting the progressive militarization of police forces even before both the war on drugs and the post 9/11 war on terror. This in turn speaks to how and why, in response to George Zimmerman's being acquitted of Trayvon Martin's murder, activists Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi created a quote, Black-centered political will and movement building project called Black Lives Matter, hashtag Black Lives Matter, end quote, that confronts police brutality, demands accountability, and structural institutional change. In 2020, amidst the pandemic, national and international protests demand police accountability for the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd in a criminal justice system infected by the kind of institutional racism that was the foundation for the Supreme Court's 1857 ruling in Dred Scott versus John F. A. Sanford, which declared that even when living in a free state, a slave could neither be a US citizen nor free. The 21st century reality of what Michelle Alexander called the new Jim Crow, complete with the embedded school to prison pipeline, too many P's here, school to prison pipeline, predatory lending practices, bail, fees, fines, payday loans, that along with the gutting of the Voting Act's rights with the court's ruling in Shelby County versus Holder 2013, wed mass incarceration and mass disenfranchisement. Now, this year has been challenging for everybody. And while I'm not trying to create some de facto hierarchy of oppression, the past 400 or so years have been filled with 100 forms of emotional, intellectual, and spiritual trials and tribulations for Black people. I'm grateful for the many young folks taking to the streets to protest myriad injustices, but for many of us, surviving between these glimmers of hope requires the strategies and that resonate for the quote unquote folks, to borrow Zora Neale Hurston's term for Black communities. They are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves around kitchen tables and barbershops and beauty salons, from the podium, the stage, or any number of screens. While other audiences may appreciate this humor and even find it edifying on some level, that is a happy byproduct. These bits are not really constructed for crossover. By telling stories that show us, quote, laughing to keep from crying, or express when we're just plain laughing mad without concerns about translation or other cultural dilution, enable us to cope through the hard times which always come. And it is about telling the truth. If you're going to tell the people the truth, you'd better make them laugh or they will kill you. This truism has been attributed to Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw, but it could have just as easily come from Moms Mabley or Richard Pryor. Comedy's potential for truth-telling is unquestionable, and stand-up is arduously its truest form. It's just you, the microphone, and the audience, whether live, pre-recorded, or virtual. 1 minute of stand-up can simultaneously capture a specific historical, socio-historical moment and resonate beyond its contemporary context, as exemplified by this clip from Richard Pryor, live in concert. Okay. Sorry. Need to share the screen again. I really apologize for this. Okay, now I can share my screen.
Then the police came, I went in the house. Because they got magnums too. And they don't kill cars. They kill niggas. Police got a chokehold they use out here though, man. They choke niggas to death. That mean you be dead when they through. Right? Did you know that? Wait, the niggas going, yeah, we gonna wipe a no, I had no idea. Yeah, two grab your legs, one grab your head, it'll snap. Oh shit, he broke. Can you break a nigger? I said, okay. Let's check them in. Yep, hey, you can break a nigger right there. Like, let's drag him downtown, okay.
Okay, now I think that clip is instructive on multiple levels. I mean, I can't help but think about the ways, the thing that immediately comes to my mind when I hear the word chokehold immediately brings to mind the brutal killing of Eric Garner and his plea, "I can't breathe," which became not just a slogan, but became an enunciation of the desire for accountability for police violence. But, you know, none of this is new. It was not new in this clip from 1979, nor was it only discovered in his comic vitriol, in his stand-up segments in Wattstax, the film of the 1972 benefit concert at the LA Coliseum, organized by Stax Records to commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Watts riots in Los Angeles. Well, I certainly bristle at what corporate news spaces are referring to it as a national reckoning about racial injustice, this narrative has been repeated multiple times over the past 30 years, with the outcry becoming progressively more widespread. In 1992, in response to the acquittal of the police officers for the vicious beating of Rodney King. In 2013, in response to the acquittal of George Zimmerman's killing of, for the killing of Trayvon Martin. In 2014, in Ferguson, when the killing of Mike Brown and the clashes between protesters and the uber-militarized police brought expansive elements of over-policing and racial injustice into national consciousness. And of course, in 2020, when the international outcry over the callous disregard for George Floyd's humanity for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and the adoption of the widespread adoption of the phrase Black Lives Matter for better and for worse, made this an issue that is pretty much inescapable. Arguably, in times of crisis or multiple crises, laughter can help to keep the ground solid, often simply by acknowledging that certain things simply understood by Black folks. Racial profiling, the understanding that your status, your money, or your degrees will not save you, the talk you have to have with your Black and biracial sons and daughters are part of our reality, as it was for our parents and grandparents, etc. During the week of widespread protest following the murder of George Floyd and the actual acknowledgement of the Breonna Taylor killing months earlier, Amber Ruffin, stand-up comic and writer for Late Night with Seth Meyers, was given the show's cold open for a week of giving her stories of encounters with the police. Ruffin is a skillful storyteller who is both clever and charming. And one might think that her exceptionalism and, dare I say, respectability inoculate her from racism. It does not.
Then the police came.
Sorry, it restarted.
Last night, I told you a story about an encounter I had with police. Now let me tell you another story. One time, a few years ago, I was living in Amsterdam and I flew to Chicago for the weekend to visit some friends who live there. When I got there, my friend Jeff and I hopped in his car and headed out to pick up our friend Krasny, who just so happened to live next to the alley behind the police station. So Jeff parks his car at the gas station at the end of the alley so that I can run out, go pick up Krasny, and take her back to the car. I'm friggin' thrilled. I hadn't seen her in years. So we were all gonna go have dinner and catch up. Now, I get out of the car and go down the alley, and because Jeff is watching me, I skip down the alley to her house to make him laugh, you know? But little did I know, skipping down a police station alley is a big no-no, because I end up skipping towards a cop car that's driving at me down the alley. The sirens go off, a cop gets out and his gun is drawn and he goes, "Put your hands on the hood of the car, put your hands on the hood." This man is furious. I comply and his partner pats me down. Now this man is livid. It makes no sense. His anger level towards me is insane. I'm a young, adorable delight, literally skipping down the street, and I've infuriated him. So this man asked me, "Where are you coming from?" And I go, "Amsterdam." Now this answer enrages him. He goes, "No, where are you coming from right now? Where are you coming from?" And I go, "From the airport, from a flight from Amsterdam." And he goes, why in the world are you running down this alley? I go, I'm not running, I'm skipping. I'm happy to be back in town. I'm going to pick up my friend Krasny and take her back to Jeff's car, and we're all gonna go catch up over dinner. And I remember, oh, thank God, Jeff is here. I gesture back to Jeff. Jeff is standing outside of his car, just watching all of this. And he goes, so the cop and I see Jeff, and thank God Jeff didn't come running up to us because he could have gotten us both shot. But the cop sees that Jeff, a white man, has seen all of this, and he changes his attitude with the quickness. He's suddenly professional instead of antagonistic. And he tells me that I was wrong for running. And it takes everything in me not to tell him that if I wanted to run down the alley, that would be perfectly legal. So instead, I also gently remind him that I was not running, I was skipping. So the cop gets in his car and he leaves. And I walk to Krasny's house. I get her. We take her back to the car. Jeff is really bothered by what happens, but I'm not. That man could have shot me in a second. People who know me would be running around talking about attacking an officer. Doesn't seem like something Amber would do, but the officer said she did. So that has to be what happened. So the second I see Krasny, I feel a lot better. And we go and we have a lot of fun that night. And if you think about it, it's kind of my duty to have fun. Because at any time, I could get murdered by the police. Now, every Black person I know has stories like that. It's crazy that people don't run around telling everyone these stories all the time, but there's this unspoken rule that Black people are supposed to take it in stride. Can you imagine having someone pull a gun on you and being expected to take it in stride? Now imagine a bunch of incidents like that over one lifetime. Multiply that by 43 million African Americans. And that is why things are like this right now. That is why people are angry. And if you're not angry, why not?
Okay. Are you seeing me again? Okay. Sorry, lost my place. Ruffin's experiences with the police are not unique. But her stories resonate with most Black folks and reaffirm these shared experiences. For non-Black or Brown audiences, her general relatability does not negate the power of her, albeit friendly accusation. Why not? Why aren't you angry? Now, let me be clear. Laughter, humor, will not right all of these wrongs, nor will it assuage all of our anxieties and fears. What laughter, and by extension comedy, can do is enable us to recognize with that knowing nod that the obfuscation of truth and the codification of lies are always at play, that it is essential to know whether you are being laughed at with or laughed at, and that punching up is always preferable to punching down, especially when you know how it feels to be marginalized. In short, it helps us to survive. I'd like to end with a clip from Dave Chappelle's 846. It was released for free on Netflix's A Joke page, YouTube page. Neither the comic nor Netflix profited from the 26-minute commentary. And I call it a commentary because it's not exactly stand-up, but it is the virtue of Dave Chappelle's cachet as a stand-up, which made this 26-minute piece significant. Now, Dave Chappelle is the GOAT, one of the most gifted comic storytellers and stand-ups of our time. He is not unproblematic. His transphobic material is clearly punching down, and I would call his gender commentaries sexist rather than misogynistic. However, his dedication to the art of his stand-up and the way his work is mobilized is unimpeachable. His unique ability to take us on a circuitous path in a story that begins and ends at approximately the same or an adjacent point that has been transformed at the end of this story is truly amazing. This clip, which is in no way the most compelling or hard-hitting, but it is instructive because in many ways it encapsulates what I think comic discourse has to, can, and I need for it, and I think others do as well. We need for it to do. I'm going to show you the clip in a second, but when I initially drafted the abstract for this paper, I hope to illustrate how through the lens of comedy, discussing issues of race can be both affirming for and accessible to multiple audiences. While ultimately I still believe that stand-up can be the conduit for mainstream audiences to listen and understand the cultural context for Black comic discourse, as well as the lived experiences that inform them, I think at this moment, that is not necessarily the raison d'etre. Rather, it's about being heard and being seen and perhaps being understood. Now let me start the clip. Sorry, it keeps going to the beginning.
Every Black person I
In like 1993, I'm not sure what year it was, but I was in LA. I had smoked a joint and I was watching the movie Apocalypse Now. It was like just after 4 o'clock in the morning. And what later would become known the Northridge earthquake happened. It felt like it started in my apartment. You know, I'm from east Mississippi. On this side, we don't know what earthquakes are about. Tell you something, man. Excuse me for burping. This shit was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. A lot of things went through my mind. I was like not naked, but you know what I mean, just chilling in my boxes. Put my clothes on. I found my weed and some a pipe and a lighter and some money and my keys, all these things, while the earthquake is happening, while I'm experiencing what earthquake is the first time, and I was certain that I might very possibly die. As a matter of fact, I remember I made a point not to scream, just in case I lived, I wouldn't have to remember myself being vocally terrified, but I forgave myself being terrified. That earthquake couldn't have been more than 35 seconds. This man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that? This kid thought he was gonna die. He knew he was gonna die. He called for his mother, called for his dead mother. I've only seen that once before in my life. My father, on his deathbed, called for his grandmother. When I watched that tape, I understood this man knew he was gonna die. People watched it. People filmed it. And for some reason that I still don't understand, all these fucking police had their hands in their pockets. Who are you talking to? What are you signifying? That you can kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and feel like you wouldn't get the wrath of God. That's what is happening right now. It's not for a single cop, for all of it. Fucking all of it. I don't mean to get heavy, but we gotta say something.
And of course, I screwed this up. All I have to do is come back to this. Okay. Do you see me or am I sharing my screen?
We see you. We are about out of time, but
Okay.
I'll let you.
That-
If you have last remarks though, because this is super powerful.
That's it. I wanted to end with Chappelle because I think that line, "You got to say something," is what is built in to the power of comedic social discourse. So thank you.